Chapter 399, Mage Knight. The next day, Godfrey stood at the T-junction once more, but this time, he was the only one left in Team Yellow while Team Black still had three. All three of them stared at him with faces that told him they weren't planning on holding back. In fact, the objective was to make sure he ended up dead. Without a word, Godfrey went to the room meant for his team and sat down on the bench. Just then, he saw Arnold approaching him, his brows creased. Arnold walked into the room and dropped an envelope on the bench. "From our captain," he smirked, knowing Godfrey would not want to hear that word. Our beside captain when it came to Saul. Godfrey calmly picked up the envelope as Arnold left. He opened it with a raised eyebrow, but the moment his eyes gazed upon the content of the letter, every bit of warmth on his face died. "Lose in the most miserable way possible, or, one way or another, I'll make sure your mother is dead," Godfrey whispered. "I see." With a sudden jerk, the room began to ascend. As the deep rumbling sound filled his ears, Godfrey spoke within himself. "It's a bluff. Even Saul knows how useful my mother is. Unless he's prepared to fight against the entirety of paradise or flee, then," his eyes gleamed. "Saul, I previously just wanted to claim my knights, but now I'll kill you and everyone prepared to die for you. And I already have them named." With a loud sound, the room reached the top. There was no cheer, just silence, yet the number of people was more than 2 times the number of spectators that came the previous day. No one made a sound. News of what happened the previous day had spread throughout paradise like wildfire. Many knew of Godfrey, but back then, he wasn't even as popular as Arian. The command he issued the previous day still lingered in the minds of those that came. This wasn't a fighter they would cheer for, he was one to be feared. "And we're back. Godfrey, the only one remaining on Team Yellow, will be fighting Arnold from Team Black. However," everyone turned to the speaker, who raised one arm high. Then it slowly came down and stopped, pointing straight at Godfrey, who was behind the closed portcullis, still seated. "We can't just allow a man who can summon up to 7 major summons, which can unleash thousands more into the arena, without special rules binding him. That would not only rid the excitement, it is also unfair to his opponents." The eyes of many widened. The quiet Colosseum suddenly became filled with gasps of disbelief. 7 summons? Is this a joke? Thousands of summons? That's absurd. The spectator waited for a moment, then lifted his hand. "You, Godfrey Daniels, are also banned from taking part in any fight. Symbiosis with 2 summons is already a threat. 7 can't be allowed. Only your summons will take part, and you will summon just 1 since you're 1 man." Godfrey frowned. Some people found the restrictions reasonable, but some saw it as taking it too far by restricting him to just 1. Seeing the uproar, the spectator cleared his throat. If he faces 2 summons, he can summon 2. That quelled the uproar. "Let the match begin," the spectator announced, and the portcullis for both teams went up. Arnold stepped out and summoned his blood omen. It slammed its trident against the ground and took a step forward. It transformed into ink-like mist and covered his body. His height increased. A thick chest plate manifested over him. His fingers became long. A black hoodie also hid his face, exposing only his lips and chin. Tightening his grip around the blood trident, which he had stored enough blood in last night, Arnold pointed it at Godfrey, who still sat in his portcullis. "Bring out your summon." His voice rang. He guessed Godfrey was going to unleash the summon that could transform into a sun dragon. Because of that, he had to unleash his most powerful skill to end all these quickly. Blood flowed out of the trident's sharp tips, went into the barrier's highest point and merged together. As more merged together, it slowly formed a massive blood moon that somehow repelled the sun and encased the Colosseum in an ominous glow. A golden glow appeared at that moment. Many held their breath, waiting for which summon Godfrey would unleash. Alora and Nathan watched intently, while Saul leaned forward and entwined his fingers as he gazed at the golden portal to see which of the Golden Order knights would emerge. He had already spoken to Arnold about them and they had made their plan. With the blood moon, he had a high percentage chance of winning. At that moment, a lean silhouette appeared at the portal, and a knight walked out, clad in streamlined armor with a chest plate that had an upside-down half-bow-shaped curve at the top to protect his neck. There was a book in his hand, a tome. The moment Dax came out, the silence in the Colosseum burst like a bubble. Saul sprang to his feet. He was going mad. "I knew you'd be surprised." A voice rang and he saw a crack in space beside him. Saul trembled, his rage physically affecting his body. Arnold's eyes narrowed greatly, then turned to his captain. Seeing his captain's expression, Arnold held his trident with both hands. "I'll end this quickly." Just then, Dax unleashed Jin. The massive white-furred creature with red hair took a step forward, about to lunge toward Arnold, but right at that moment, its two arms which were holding the massive hammer spun with great force. Like something else took over, disregarding Jin's body movement. The hammer went straight for the head of Dax, who wasn't expecting that attack. In less than a blink of an eye, the hammer was already before the Mage Knight's face. It was a swift, calculated move, a move that guaranteed a quick victory and instant death to the opponent. Embers burst out of Dax's tome, and he vanished, reappearing 10 meters away from Jin. "How?" Arnold frowned. "When did that tome open?" While he thought about that, he controlled Jin to lunge at Dax, swinging his hammer with the intent to kill, but Dax kept blinking. Arnold aimed his trident at him, and blood spears were launched from the blood moon. Blood also poured out from the trident, enough to fill half a pool, and blood horses with spikes emerged, charging toward Dax and Jin. They formed a wall of blood and death, while several spears came from above. Dax blinked himself and Jin, reappearing behind Arnold, who laughed as a massive blood beast with no eyes, just a massive maw, emerged from below Jin. Jin grabbed its fangs to stop it from closing its mouth and swallowing him, but countless crimson tentacles came out of its mouth and wrapped around Jin's body. "You can't move him once he's locked there. How long will you keep running?" Arnold's voice rang as his eyes followed Dax. The blood horse charged, melted, and reappeared behind him. 6 pillars burst from the ground around Arnold with spikes that joined together, forming a safe zone for Arnold, a place where Dax would have to sacrifice his life to get into. Blood was still spilling from the trident. Arnold planned to envelop the entire arena, and then there would be nowhere for Dax to run. Dax blinked and appeared above the massive blood monster without eyes. His tome flipped to the 7th page. 7th page, Seismic Inferno Hammer. A hammer manifested in his hand, and he slammed the beast's head. Ripples like magma went through the creature's body before it dried into nothing. Dax landed and turned his head to Arnold. "I've just been looking for which skill is weak enough for you, but since you're adamant..." His tome flipped to the 4th page. 4th page, Extinguish. He began to levitate. 5 rock monuments with unknown writings crashed into the ground all around Dax as flames came out of his body in the shape of ribbons. A bright glow emerged from his body, making him look otherworldly, like a being who had become one with fire. Arnold felt cold for some reason, a bad feeling. His eyes slowly widened as a torrent of flames burst forth like the roar of 6 primordial behemoths. It swallowed the area. The spectators watched the dancing flames held back by the barrier with pounding hearts. Arnold blasted a great amount of blood, but it didn't even buy him 1 second as the flames met him. His scream pierced the air, yet it also didn't last. Dax looked at the 4th page, from which dying embers billowed out as he descended. The space within the rocks where he stood was the only safe place when this spell was activated. He lifted up his head and saw a black skeleton kneeling on the ground with its mouth wide open, and a trident held by both hands. Saul lowered his head and lifted it up again, as the skeleton crumbled into dust along with the trident. Dax shut the tome. A golden portal appeared and he walked into it without a word. "There's no need to waste more time. I'll stay right here. Just bring out the other two," Godfrey said, his golden eyes locked on the spectator who had a hard time breathing. Saul nodded. The tome was just too powerful, but he doubted Godfrey would bring Dax out a second time. At least Nathan and Alora could secure one victory. All they needed to do was kill just one knight, and he would be satisfied for now. But since Godfrey went against his letter, he should be prepared for what was coming next. The portcullis opened, and Nathan stepped into the still-hot arena with Alora. Both of them swiftly unleashed their summons. Nathan used fusion while Alora activated eclipsal state. Nathan unleashed a great roar, and the claws of his panda grew larger. Black mist slowly billowed out of his body. It came with the stench of rot. Alora brandished her greatsword, and over 100 white petals appeared around her, floating harmlessly. "Let me, my king." A voice rang in Godfrey's head, and he stretched his hand. A golden portal appeared outside the portcullis. Everyone was expecting the second portal, but there was none. A 14-foot-tall knight emerged and drew his twin swords. He didn't stop walking, neither did his pace quicken. His armor slowly turned crimson, and then he switched to his humanoid dragon state. Solstice was a chief general. His swords were the east and the west. One represented his rising, the other his setting. He was the very definition of whatever rises shall one day set, yet he defied himself because, after setting, he rose once more, again and again without end. His arrival meant the rise of one and the fall of another. Alora and Nathan shot toward him, yet he kept his pace, his cloak swaying as he moved. When they were upon him, Solstice suddenly began to move. His footwork was swift. With his right he pushed himself toward the right, and with his left he pushed himself toward the left, straight at Alora. But at the last moment he bent over her sword strike, sliced off her head from the back, and plunged his other sword into the panda's neck. It came out the other side. He slowly pulled out his sword from the two who still couldn't believe what was going on. Solstice's cloak swayed, and from the bottom that grazed the floor, fire suddenly sparked, and it followed him as he went around both of them. Solstice sheathed his sword. As he walked back, his foes burned in sunfare. He had taken enough of these people using his king for sport. It was an insult, and he, the king's chief general, would not tolerate it, even if the king did. Young or old, the sword had no eyes, neither did the sun. Silence swirled around the Colosseum as people watched Solstice walk back to his summoner. From the crowd, a man rose to his feet, clapping with a bright smile on his face. Ronald couldn't be more proud of his son. He grew up to be more than what he could wish for, and he wasn't even there to form his character. Godfrey! Someone rose to his feet opposite Ronald's bleachers. People began to rise from a few dozen to hundreds, several hundreds. Godfrey! 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 His name echoed from the mouths of many. Their voices were thick in the air, causing their hearts to pound. This made them shout even louder. Amongst the spectators, Percival gazed at the golden-haired young man still seated and looking at everyone chanting his name, while his knight halted at the portcullis. "You held yourself until the end. You did it. People can see what is unfair. They know this game was against us, against you. And when you still emerge the victor even in this unfair tournament, you're bound to be more than what Saul desired." His lips curled into a smile. "So, how does it feel to have your name chanted by well over 1,000 people? How does it feel not to be hated publicly?" Percival chuckled softly. "I bet it feels good." At that moment, Godfrey rose to his feet and stepped out of the portcullis. He once sat, the sunlight stretching to its limits yet unable to touch him. Now, it shone right upon him. The Golden King, someone suddenly bellowed, and almost half the crowd began to bellow even louder. Most of the cohort members that were supporting Saul's unfair tournament went silent. The speaker kept laughing nervously, desperately seeking a place to hide or a way to escape, but there was none. Godfrey walked to the center of the arena and looked straight at Saul. "Saul, I don't think you're fit to be the captain of the Vagabonds. You've lost sight of what the Vagabonds are supposed to represent. Leave that position and leave the cohort." Saul waved his hand and a portal opened up. "I warned you," he muttered to himself as he walked through the portal that grew wider and wider, but the moment he went through it, the portal collapsed. Godfrey. As his name echoed, Godfrey turned and spotted Arian in the crowd. He noticed Godfrey and nodded with a smile. Finally, his undefeated teacher had met defeat. His pride that had formed over decades of countless victories was brought down in the most humiliating way. All of Saul's pillars were brought down, and one young man stood in the center of it all. At the watchtower, Gabriel looked at the people hurling in boxes of books found in a dungeon they raided. Things like these were what he loved. A soft smile graced his lips. He won, and the people cheered. The typical ending, but I guess he deserves it. He's never been cheered on despite all the good he's done. Gabriel mused, his eyes narrowing. Unfortunately, once a man is halfway down the rabbit hole, he has no other choice than to go deeper. His eyes went to the king on his chessboard. A black king with a queen and a knight, facing a white king with a white knight and a white queen. It was time for the Black King to make a move, and from the look of things, he was definitely going for the White Queen. Each move was him replicating the ongoing event and, of course, deliberately manipulating it all from behind the scenes, and the result proved him right. A fair world is subject to change. That's why I made the right choice keeping Earth under my control. Humans can easily spiral out of control once they're not bound. Gabriel's eyes gleamed. However, his eyes settled on the board. The best part is yet to come. In the infirmary, Valentina stood before Arden, who lay on the bed. She was already healed completely, but needed some time. It wasn't easy to shrug off the memory of having all your bones broken and being slammed into the ground repeatedly. Even when her brain was healed, the ordeal replayed in her head. Things like this had to be dealt with psychologically, as there was no way to just wipe off the experience. "I came as soon as I heard you're awake," Valentina said, and Arden smiled. "You've been sleeping quite a lot lately," she said, and sat at the side of the bed. "The tournament, how did it go?" Arden lifted her head. "Godfrey won. If you go outside, you'll hear the crowd chanting his name." Valentina's words made Arden blink, her face brightening up. "Should we go?" Valentina smiled and rose to her feet. At that moment, a swirling portal opened. An arm grabbed her, then pulled her in. The portal collapsed the moment she went through it. Arden's expression changed, but her expression wasn't the only one that changed. Ronald's eyes gleamed. He activated a skill called Treasure Call, a skill that took him straight to wherever his treasure was. It was an adaptive skill that had a few similarities with Exchange. In a flash of golden light, he appeared where Valentina was, but it was in space. However, he could already see Valentina held by a man clad in a black Corinthian helmet, breastplates, a battle skirt, and sandals inlaid with metal that went from his feet to his shins. Ronald saw the eye patch over one of his eyes and forced himself toward the man, throwing a punch at his face. Saul blocked the blow but flew backwards. Ronald swiftly sent Valentina back before she died. It wasn't more than 5 seconds since she came here, although she was already affected. Just as he was about to teleport himself, Saul's eyes gleamed and he used Will Freeze, but he wasn't the only one. Another titled god used Will Freeze. The Will Freeze of 2 demigods forced Ronald to pause, and a spear tore through his back and came out through his right chest. Blood spurted out like a flower but remained still right after that. A creeping layer of ice formed on Ronald's skin as his insides boiled into vapor. He thought Saul used eclipsal state, but he was mistaken. The skill Saul used was echo. His actual summon was waiting to ambush him. This was the domain of Saul's first summon. His most dangerous skill, Space Dome. The spatial battle Spartan's innate skill allowed the summon to move from one place to another, and after adaptation, it was able to move from one place to another by opening portals, which were once meant for travel through worlds. Saul watched Ronald drift in a frozen state, void of life. His cold gaze gleamed with indifference. "Bring her." At his command, his summon opened a portal once more and dragged Valentina back into this space dome and pushed her towards her dead husband. Valentina stared at Ronald, who, despite moving toward her, was drifting away from her. As her body responded violently to the environment, a beautiful phantom made out of water appeared and moved around Ronald. A blob of glowing water engulfed him. It was the only source of bright light in this dark place, with distant stars that barely gave light. "He's dead. Don't worry, I made it painless. Yours will be too." His voice was the last thing Valentina heard as her body shut down. Her hands were reaching out for Ronald, hoping she would get to him, even in death. Saul's face hardened. This still didn't quell his anger. It still didn't atone for his decades of hard work that their son ripped away from him. Those summons were his. At that moment, golden strings began to move through Ronald's body. His fingers twitched and his eyes snapped open. Instantly, he teleported himself and Valentina away. They both appeared in their sitting room, and he gently placed her on the sofa. Luckily, Valentina's self-healing began to work the instant she was taken from an environment that could as well be deemed anti-human life. His eyes went to a golden coin on the table. "Come," he said inwardly, and the coin flashed. Godfrey appeared beside the table. What greeted him was his father on his knees, while his mother lay on the bed with deathly pale skin. There was a layer of ice on Ronald's skin. Godfrey's light expression became terrifying as his eyes gleamed brightly. Ronald said one word, "Saul." A portal opened at that moment. The swirling mist revealed a snow-capped mountain region beyond. "You called," Saul's voice rang through it. Godfrey summoned Tempest and Toria. "Watch her," he ordered with a frigid tone as he shot through the portal. Ronald rose to his feet, glanced at his wife one last time, and walked through the portal. Both Godfrey and his father stepped into a mountainous region, right into a blizzard. All around them was white. With a thought, Godfrey froze the blizzard around them with telekinesis, and he was finally able to see Saul. Saul sat on a rock holding a black rod. It looked like an ordinary rod, but that was a weapon that even gods would be wary of. A true strike meant your existence would be eradicated. No afterlife, no second chances, no miraculous revival by some skill. Ronald summoned his bear. It unleashed an earth-shaking roar that only made Saul chuckle. "Roar all you want. I'll leave your soulless remains here for the birds. This is a beautiful graveyard, don't you think?" Ronald used eclipsal state and lunged toward Saul. His claws gleamed as they inched toward Saul's face. There was no tolerance, none at all, to hear what this man had to say. The reason? He already considered him a dead man, and dead men do not speak. The spatial Spartan deflected Ronald's claws with his round shield. He had been there all along, just hidden in spatial fluctuations to make it seem like he wasn't there. Ronald guessed that the other skill Saul used consumed too much mana, and he couldn't risk it now that it wasn't a secret anymore. That aside, Saul knew it wouldn't work on Godfrey. The moment that name appeared in his mind, his eye went in search of him, but Godfrey wasn't there any longer. When he felt fingers clamp around his neck from the back, his eyes narrowed, but it was already too late as Godfrey flung him right into a rock over 30 feet tall. Saul tore right through the rock, and somersaulted on the snow several times before he flipped to his feet, yet kept sliding backwards. A low growl made him look up. Ronald burst through the blizzard. Saul manifested a shield and blocked the blow. With a roar, Ronald slammed his feet into the shield, launching Saul away. "Don't you ever!" His voice tore through the blizzard, as snow burst upward due to his speed. "Touch her!" Ronald roared as his bear took his place. It formed a huge tire with golden spikes bursting out of the snow, following its insane speed toward Saul. Saul went toward this massive beast, his shield right before him. Silver light burst out of him as an armor manifested over his body, but right as he was about to clash with the massive bear, Godfrey suddenly appeared. "Will freeze." Saul's eyes tilted. He could see the bright sheen of Godfrey's golden irises. Godfrey wore the immortal armor, his crimson form a sharp contrast to the white space. His fist slammed right into Saul's face, throwing him off the bear's path. Saul planted his feet into the ground and tore open a rift so that instead of being thrown into the air, he sank into the ground the further he went. He exhaled and summoned his spatial Spartan. Godfrey and his father were ignoring his summon entirely. This time they would fight together. There was no way his summon would be ignored. Both sides charged at each other. Ronald collided with Saul's summon while Godfrey, seeing Saul thrust the soul-piercing rod, vanished. Something else emerged from the fog, a golden dragon. The moment it bit down on the rod, the snow beneath their feet and the blizzard became vapor. Saul's eyes widened when the dragon unleashed Sunfear. He lifted up his shield but was sent back several hundred meters. Everything in his path was burnt to nothing. Even his shield melted, and scorched wounds decorated his body. Saul's eyes went to his soul-piercing rod. Only half of it remained. The other half had turned into liquid. What remained of the rod glowed softly. It was losing its power. A loud sound rang as Godfrey met him with a Spartan kick. The rod flew off his hand. His last relic was gone. Filled with rage that bordered on madness, Saul charged at Godfrey, throwing a powerful blow with the intent to kill, now more than ever. Godfrey returned the favor. Their fists clashed, then again and again and again. The earth trembled, the wind exploded and roared as both demigods slammed their fists into each other without restraint. Saul was mad. He had lost everything he struggled for. Godfrey was also mad that his mother had almost died while he was around. The fact that this man couldn't accept defeat and peacefully walk away enraged him. Why go after his family? Why kill people who are vulnerable? He couldn't understand it. It was cowardice. Cowardice that sought to bring him pain. While they fought, hills were damaged by Ronald and the spatial Spartan. "I trained Aryan. You think you can defeat me in hand-to-hand combat?" Saul sneered. "You're blinded." Godfrey shifted, evading a punch, and slammed an uppercut that made more blood burst from Saul's nostrils and mouth. He staggered backwards, wavering from side to side. He looked at Godfrey and finally saw the young man was completely unscathed. His armor, it must be a relic. Panting heavily, Saul's eyes shifted. He thought about calling his summon only for a loud sound to split the air. Ronald let go of the summon whose neck he had just snapped and fell on one knee in the midst of a 70-foot-tall rock. They brought down in their fight. Disbelief colored Saul's eyes. "Release her and I won't kill you," Godfrey said, holding himself back. Saul's expression became ugly. Within him, Apollyon watched. The king she was waiting for was the man of her dreams, the cold, unbothered king, but this man who showed concern might not be so bad after all. While this happened in his soul space, Saul kept staggering until he got to what remained of the soul-piercing rod. Godfrey manifested a longsword, but Saul began to laugh like a madman. "At least I have one win." He plunged the rod through his chest with a loud yell. "Your noble knight dies with me." His soul shattered. His body remained standing for a while, then it dropped. Godfrey stared at his corpse. He didn't know what to think, but his father patted his shoulder. "You did your best," he grunted and looked around. "We should leave." He teleported both of them back to paradise. Apollyon found herself in a dark world. Darkness rushed toward her and began to forcefully twist her. This was the afterlife world. It wasn't her soul that was shattered, but here her tear, which was suppressed, soared tremendously. But the cost of being a true god judged to be in this part of the afterlife was to become a harrowing omen. She formed a cocoon of ice to protect herself, but the ice slowly turned black. Apollyon thought the darkness was forcing its way through, but when she looked at her deformed hands with fingers that were too long, she realized it was she who was changing the ice. This transformation wasn't physical. It was the darkness within that attracted the one outside. "My eyes." When she noticed her vision was dwindling, Apollyon broke down the cocoon. Fighting fate was useless. But then she noticed something. At the horizon. It slowly took shape the closer it came. In this dark world, a pure white light like that couldn't be ignored. Her eyes widened when she discovered it was a knight riding a white unicorn. He wore white armor with a winged helmet and held a huge lance. His long cloak danced in the wind as he galloped toward her. The unicorn lifted up its forelimbs and neighed loudly when they got to Apollyon. "It's been a while, sister," his deep voice rang. His presence alone made the darkness affecting her cease. She was before a chief general, one of the likes of Solstice. Before her was the dawn of the morning. He was the morning, while lament was the night. "I saw you fall from the sky, and I come in peace," the white knight said as he dismounted. They had once fought in the past, and he knew Apollyon could hold a grudge. "I met him." The knight tilted his head. "Who?" "The king." In the Pendragon mansion, Rick walked into one of the rooms no one had entered in a while. It was the room Isolde usually kept her drawings in, and it had been closed for a while. But right now, the doors to this large room were open. As he went in, his eyes went to Isolde, who stood in a nightgown staring at a painting he had never seen before. It was a man made of shadows with golden eyes piercing through the eyeholes of his helmet. He held a golden longsword and seemed to be looking at something in the air. "What is that?" Rick didn't know what drove him to ask without even greeting her first, but there was something about this painting that disregarded all authority in the room. It was like the painting was alive. "That's the unknown king," Isolde said, her palms stained with black ink. This painting was massive, human-sized, and she drew it without a pencil. Since the early hours of the morning when many slept, she had stepped into this room like someone possessed and began to draw until this hour. "An existence that resides within Godfrey. I just discovered Godfrey's identity as king. That title is a being, a living being." She paused. Her breath trembled, and it will appear once he dies. "What?" Rick frowned. "I saw Frey die in the midst of the ruination. I saw that the ruination won't be long. It will take a short time, a very short time, because something broke the order. An ancient god was born on Earth." Rick looked at Isolde. That meant his tear would rise once more. Many others would benefit. Godfrey could save the world from the ruination as their tears would begin to skyrocket, but Isolde's expression meant a different thing. "I'm going to make sure he doesn't die," she said, knowing fully well it meant sacrificing millions, maybe hundreds of millions. Her sins, the sins of seeing the future, were heavy, but she would have to carry them alone. "Still working, huh?" A man in his 60s chuckled as he walked over to the girl underneath a huge truck. Lucy rolled out and sat up. She wiped the sweat off her forehead with her forearm, then exhaled as she dropped the spanner. "Everyone that has tried fixing her has failed." The man folded his muscular arms as he gazed down, meeting her gaze. "I know that. I also know it can be fixed. I mean, look at this thing." Lucy slammed the truck's steel frame. This truck had several tires and a huge tortoise shell on its back. It was a monster made from dungeon materials and the brilliant minds of Earth's engineers. Although it consumed a lot of cores, with the rate of dangerous terrains in dungeons, this was the perfect vehicle, especially now. A month had passed since Saul was killed. After his death, the cohort went through lots of transformations. Those that still believed in Saul's ideals were driven away, and Godfrey changed their name from vagabonds to sentinels and made a speech that they should stop seeing themselves as fugitives. This was their own place, their world. Bearing the name fugitive meant tying themselves to the order of the outside world that refused to accept them for what they were. Unfortunately, even after the chant of hundreds, Godfrey refused to become the captain. But he changed the hierarchy, abolishing elite and regular classes. They were now captains. The cohort was slowly becoming a small team of elites once more, and with customization and mastery, they were gaining more ground in summoner skills. Summons could now be built to become better. This was a form of artificial adaptation, a painful process with a rewarding end. Summons that were meant to rely on their hides and fur now had armor, boosting their defense factor greatly. Lucy picked up the spanner with renewed determination. I'm sure I can make it work. That engine is one of a kind. It was built from other scraps, one of a kind. It's an impossible task. The man squatted as Lucy rolled under the vehicle once more. He shook his head, walked over to the column and slammed a red button. There was a loud sound and steel ropes came from above, hooked the truck and lifted it up. Lucy blinked several times when it began to ascend. You have more light this way, the man said. I don't want more light, she replied. Exactly, he sighed, then looked at her with a softer gaze. Because you're used to being in the shadows in the dark of something bigger. The old man's words made Lucy pause. He went close, then stretched his hand toward her. Stand up. Lucy rose to her feet on her own. She wore an orange coverall but brought the top down to her waist, revealing her gray top while the sleeves of the coverall hung loosely at her side. As usual, her hair was packed into 2 ponytails, and it made her face even more striking. She was the most good-looking girl not just in the workshop but in the cohort as a whole, considering her age and the fact that she rarely wore makeup. At a glance, a young man would think he met a badass young lady with appealing looks and personality, but looks could be deceiving. It once took her to the arms of a Polaris top student and right into the depths of a pool, left to drown. Watching her walk away, the man squinted. Where are you going? To meet my friends since I'm not welcome here, she replied without looking back. And what are you going to do there? Watch how they've grown and then hide once more. The man's words made Lucy's stubborn look collapse as she stopped walking. I've seen how you've been acting ever since they all came back. The big boys, Godfrey, Percival, Isaac. You have all these boys around you. You're the closest to them amongst anyone in paradise, yet it's obvious you're struggling to fit in. I didn't ask for your advice. Lucy turned to the man with a frown. But you need it. Your summon doesn't define you, Lucy. It's not everything you are, even if our world sees through those lenses. I don't, and it's the same for them too. You're your problem. You can't be yourself if everything about you is defined by the public's views. I'm myself. Then why do you hide your summon? The old man tilted his head. You could have easily summoned it to help you with this vehicle. You know, bond with it publicly, yet you act like it's a shame to you. Everyone has been using their summons this past month. We're celebrating a transformation brought by your friend. Your friend. But I've been seeing you appearing here more often when others are celebrating. Lucy looked around as if to confirm if they were the only ones in the workshop. Then, Lucy turned and walked away. The man rubbed his forehead. What's wrong with her? As she walked as fast as her legs could carry her, tears pooled in her eyes. She swiftly went into an alley to hide. Who was she to tell them that she lost her summon while raiding a dungeon alone after seeing how Isolde, Godfrey, and Isaac had grown? The incident with Snow's family told her that even your loved ones might not always be there, but that decision ended wrongly. She couldn't find the courage to say her summon was dead to the same people who risked their lives to evolve it. She tried to find herself, find her own path, and hope it led back to being together with her friends, but that choice ended horribly. Now she lived these past 3 months dyeing her hair each day and wearing a fake smile like nothing happened. Maybe she wanted to forget it, to live in a delusion she brought up for herself. She was miserable and aware of how miserable she was. What path? She wanted to be with her friends and be happy, but every time it ended with how she wanted to be like them. Just be content. Those words spoken countless times were never acknowledged by her mind. Lucy stayed in the alley for a while before leaving. She went back to the workshop, and the old man, who sat by the turtle truck examining a spanner, turned to her. "Can I just try to fix it?" This was her solace, putting all her focus into something, a time where nothing else could enter her mind. The man nodded softly. "Of course, let me help you. You said it couldn't be fixed." "Well, I'm working with one of the brightest mechanics in paradise. I'm sure with my knowledge and your quick thinking, we should be able to get this monster moving." The man chuckled. As Lucy walked toward him, someone appeared at the wide entrance. "Lucy, the watchman wants you in the tower." She paused, feeling cold all of a sudden. "The watchman, that's a privilege I've never had." The man chuckled. Lucy knew he wanted to make her feel proud of her skill, but she knew who Gabriel really was. A few minutes later, Lucy walked into the tower and saw more than 24 sentinels moving around with books and placing them on new shelves. Her fear subsided as she approached them and took a few books. She kept breathing through her mouth as she placed the books on the shelves according to the boxes she took them from. She eventually got to the point where the old books were. The titles on the spines caught her gaze. She stretched out her hand toward one whose title was Earth's Ancient Civilization, but someone beside her whispered. It was the kind of whisper where one wanted to yell but had to make it as silent as possible. "Lucy." Lucy turned to see another sentinel glaring at her. "The watchman doesn't joke with his books, and you can't touch them without his permission." "She has my permission." Gabriel's voice rang as he appeared from thin air. Lucy and the other sentinels were shocked, their eyes widening. For the others it was out of awe. For Lucy it was fear. It felt like she stood before the devil himself, and could see the cruel truth beyond his warm, handsome appearance. Gabriel squinted as he drew close. "Are you afraid of me?" "I'm not," she replied with a forced smile. Gabriel shrugged. "Give me those," he said to a sentinel who quickly handed over the books she held. Gabriel began to put them into an empty shelf below. "I came to help," he smiled warmly. Lucy could barely keep her smile. Just then, they heard a loud sound, as if the door was pushed with tremendous force. There was some noise, and 2 young men appeared at the other end of the row. Godfrey and Percival, who had rushed over when they got to the camp and heard she was here, were met with a scene they didn't expect. Lucy and Gabriel with books. Gabriel even squatted and looked at them with a confused face. "What's going on?" he asked, looking around. "I spent just 1 month staying with my mother, and it seems like I've already grown dull. What is this? Is he telling me I've had enough of a break?" Godfrey thought. Gabriel blinked. "Did both of you barge in here because you were not called?" He chuckled, but inwardly his voice was placid. "They both came for her. Seems like she's worth something, but she's not my target, Godfrey. I want something much closer, something that can give a fight and leave a scar. A deep scar. But I can't distract you from the ruination, so let's just fill up these shelves today." Percival cleared his throat and went to pick up books. Seeing Godfrey put books into the shelves beside him, Gabriel smiled. "It's been a while. I was starting to think you were avoiding me." Percival and Lucy, who were on the other shelf, looked at each other. Godfrey smiled. "It's good you came. The stars are aligning, and our world is much brighter than ever." Gabriel's words made Godfrey turn. "What?" "The ruination is here." Even after they left the watchtower, Percival lingered around Lucy until she went home. Lucy walked into her room to pick up her headset. She grabbed it, took a step toward the exit, but paused and turned back to the window. She approached it, swung the curtain open, and saw a blue-haired young man on the other side of the street. He leaned against the wall of another building, arms crossed. Lucy's eyes slowly widened in surprise. Percival tilted his head toward the window and their eyes met. He smiled, then waved his hand at her. She couldn't resist smiling and waving back. After unlocking the window, she slid it open. "It's late. You should go home." Her voice echoed in the deserted street. It was already past 7, and this part of paradise had no event that could keep people awake at night. This area was purely residential. He crossed the street, stood right below her window and looked up. "See you tomorrow, then." Lucy leaned on the windowsill, watching him walk away. Her eyes were on him until she couldn't see him anymore. "Lucy!" Suddenly, her mother yelled her name. She looked out one last time, then shut the window and left the room. When she got to the last staircase, her entire body froze when she saw Gabriel sitting at their dining table. When did he get here? Her heart drummed. "Sit down," said her mother, who placed their dinner on the table and tapped a chair. Her cheeks were rosy and her eyes bright. It was more than a privilege for the watchman, a man almost seen as a myth, to visit their home. He had just appeared out of nowhere with a basket of fruits and a book about engineering mechanics. Under her mother's glare, Lucy had to force herself against her will to the table. When she sat down, her eyes went to Gabriel's face. He had a warm, innocent smile that almost made her doubt Isolde. Clearing his throat, he picked up the cutleries and dug into their meal. "Wow!" His eyes brightened, making her mother smile. "Just wow, I haven't tasted anything like this in a long time." Gabriel gasped, then looked at her. "Why aren't you eating?" Lucy flinched, making Gabriel raise an eyebrow. She picked up her cutleries. "I'm dead." Lucy felt like waking up from this nightmare. What does this mean? She just wished this was a nightmare, but if it was, then didn't that mean the care Percival had shown would also be just a dream? She was conflicted. Both Gabriel and her mother finished their meals, but she didn't even go halfway. How could she have an appetite when the man who forcefully murdered millions just to ensure they served him was sitting right next to her? She quickly left the chair. Telepathic speech won't work because it was all connected to Gabriel. Gabriel was the medium through which telepathy worked in paradise. "Where are you going? I came here for you," Gabriel said, forcing her to stop right in her tracks. Gabriel turned to her mother. "Has she also been hiding it from you?" "Hiding what?" She lost her summon. Gabriel's statement made her mother snap toward her with grave shock. Lucy became stiff. Because of how weak she was, people like Godfrey and Percival were bound to ignore her lack of aura as a sign that it was too weak for them to perceive. And others around her tier couldn't decipher that. So how did Gabriel, a man who was at the top, discover this? What she forgot to take into account was Gabriel wasn't really human to start with. So, due to that misconception, her analysis kept going in the wrong direction. "Lucy, what happened? Why didn't you tell me? When did this happen?" Her mother couldn't find the strength to stand as she gazed at her daughter, who had a pale face. "There's no need to panic. I'm here to fix that. She's been of great help to the cohort, and a lot of people have recommended her. Not having a summon is a minor issue." Hearing Gabriel call something that could decide the outcome of one's life a minor issue raised her mother's view of him. That sentence alone made her see him as a true godlike being. Only beings like that could speak so casually about something like this. Not even demigods dared make such claims. Come to the watchtower tomorrow morning. Gabriel smiled, then left. While her mother saw him off, Lucy ran to her room and slammed the door, her heart pounding hard. It felt like the world was crumbling. Fear gripped her so much that her fingers and toes became ice cold. She couldn't stay here. It wasn't safe. It wasn't reasonable to keep silent anymore, not when this man was suddenly after her. I need to tell her. We can run to Percy's place together and we'll meet up at Godfrey's house. She thought but shook her head hard. Once her mother knew about it, she would become Cain's target. It didn't matter if she believed it or not. After a while, Lucy made up her mind to leave that night. She didn't care if it was already late, she had to get help. With that in mind, she jumped into the bed and lay down. A short while later, her mother opened the door and saw the lights off. She switched it on and saw Lucy asleep. She's strangely calm. I thought she would be so excited we won't be able to sleep tonight. Her mother thought to herself as she switched off the light once more and closed the door. The moment Lucy heard it, her eyes snapped open. She sat up, but then her eyes widened as she found herself right on the upper floor of the watchtower, her bedsheet right over her legs while Gabriel leaned against the wall beside his telescope, his hands tucked into his pockets as he stared at her. Lucy froze. Gabriel removed his hands from his pockets, exhaled, and calmly walked toward her. He loomed over her, then slowly squatted. "You're afraid of me," his sonorous voice echoed in the tower. He leaned closer. "Why?" Gabriel tilted his head. Her pretense couldn't hold anymore. He could see pure, unadulterated fear in her eyes. He turned his head away. Now I think about it. The way Godfrey and Percival barged in was strange. They did act like they were trying to protect someone. His eyes fell on her as he rose to his feet. "To protect you, and your expression shows they wanted to protect you from me. But why? Have I done anything wrong?" He blinked, squinting hard to recall if he'd done anything. At least that's how it looked from Lucy's perspective. Gabriel turned back, walked over to a chair before a small table where a chessboard was, and sat down. He crossed one leg over the other and glanced at Lucy. "What do you know?" This time around, his voice dropped a few notes. It wasn't just deep this time, it was cold. His face had this plain expression, plain yet scary. Secrets were something he depended on but hated when others kept them, especially when they concerned him. Lucy shook her head. "Nothing." Gabriel tilted his head. "Lucy, if you knew nothing, you wouldn't act like this. You're clearly not insane, your fear is specifically toward me. And it's not just you. Percival, Godfrey, maybe even Isaac. Your small club thinks they know something about me and I want to know what that is." He entwined his fingers and leaned forward. "You see, I don't like to be defamed." His eyes gleamed. He activated a sovereign tier skill, will compulsion. It allowed sovereigns to compel others to do something against their own will. "Answer me, what do you know?" "I don't know anything," Lucy replied, forcing him to squint. There was no way for a normal human to resist will compulsion, especially from someone like him. Gabriel became silent, so she was afraid of him but had no idea why. He just couldn't understand what that meant, so he remained still. Several reasons for this kind of situation passed through his head, until one finally clicked 14 minutes later. "Your mind is locked, but your body remembers," he chuckled. This was the advantage of increasing his knowledge each and every day. "This means you know something about me, something so grave your mind had to be locked or—" Gabriel leaned back. "Is this more than me? Are you hiding something else from me?" He gasped in the end. He rose to his feet and approached Lucy. "What should I do with you?" She looked at him. Lucy lowered her head, her eyes brimming with tears. Deep within her, she knew this man was definitely a vile human being. She was going to die anyway. What was the use of fear? So, while she was still gripped by it, Lucy lifted her head, staring at him square in the eyes. "Just kill me and be done with it. I know you're not who you pretend you are." Gabriel smiled, then burst into laughter. His crackling laughter echoed in the tower. Lucy sneered. "You're so lonely, you're way worse than me." Gabriel laughed further. "You're going to have to do better than that to provoke me to kill you. So you admit you're not a good person. You came to my house, you ate my mother's food, and you ended up kidnapping her daughter. Even after all those warm smiles. Is anything about you real?" Deep within herself, Lucy wondered where she got this courage. Or was it because she had already made peace with the fact that death was near? Her only wish was for it to be a swift one. Now this is the real Lucy. The one buried under endless bullying and mediocrity. "I like this Lucy more," Gabriel suddenly said. "I mean," he turned to face her, "we are indeed fascinated." Two other voices added to Gabriel's own rang out, forcing Lucy's shoulders to tremble despite her fierce gaze. She was obviously fighting with fear. Gabriel cracked his neck. "I just want to leave my mark like several great men of the past. There were people in the past world who were so brilliant, so talented that you could only stare up at them in wonder. People that, no matter what you think, you can't grasp how they did it." He went to the telescope and looked through it. "I also want to become the first at something, the one that when everyone looks at, they'd see no equal. They would struggle to comprehend how my achievements came about. Don't you also want that? Or are you satisfied with your life? You're like those side characters I've read in books. Worthless." He turned to her. "How this plays out is I kill you and then your friends barge in for vengeance." He laughed. "The power of friendship. It's epic in books, not reality." Gabriel walked toward her and squatted again. "Have you seen what the afterlife world is like? Well, you're lucky you won't because I see no use in your death. You're almost no different from a trash bag. But there's something, just one thing, that is valuable in that trash bag, which is the only reason you're alive." Gabriel grinned as he stared right into her eyes. "What I said," his voice was soft, "did it hurt?" He smiled when he saw her stare at him with bloodshot eyes. It was obvious his words pierced deep. "You have no mark in this world, Lucy. I might not be a good person according to your logic, but I can't even use you to achieve my goals. That right there is how utterly worthless you are. You can't even eat your own mother's food and thank her for it." He tilted his head. "Won't you cry yet?" With a chuckle, he rose to his feet and went back to his seat. Space cracked right next to him and something stepped out. A girl. Lucy's eyes widened as she noticed this girl looked like her, but with long elven ears. A single braid that went through the middle of her head down below her knees, almost to her ankles. Her skin was gray, and there were pink lightning-like marks on the parts of her skin that were exposed and on one side of her eye, which looked like a cat's eye. She dragged a single-edged sword. The blade glowed with pink light, matching the lightning tattoos. "Like I said, I can't use something like you, so I have to modify you to suit my taste. This is one of my latest creations, an obsidian with elven traits, a being made of two different worlds, a chimera, fed and prepared just for you." Lucy rose to her feet. "I would rather die than become a fanatic." "You won't," Gabriel replied. "You see, a fanatic is one that abides by our laws and worships us, but you, one who feeds on beast summoners but does not honor your creator, we call a lunatic. That is what you shall be until you bend your knees to us." Seeing the stubborn conviction in her eyes, Gabriel's eyes gleamed. "This will be fun to watch." At that moment, Lucy sensed a presence. She turned and saw Sebastian behind her. The raw bloodlust from him made her stagger backwards. A cold hand touched her back and a bright pink light flashed, forcing out a loud scream from Lucy. A cry that turned into a screech. The agony in her voice could break the heart of a cold man, but it was contained as Gabriel created a banished space around her. When the process ended, Lucy lay on the ground. Her hair became black halfway through, then pink. a pale shade of pink. Still struggling to recover from the pain, Lucy grabbed her hair with horror in her eyes. "Get this thing out of me! Get it out!" she screamed, pulling at her hair, as she unleashed the chimera. Sebastian scoffed and froze her in place with "Will freeze. We made you a demigod, you should be glad." He reached out for her neck. "If you kill her, she wins," Gabriel said. Sebastian let go of Lucy's neck and lifted up his right hand. The last thing Lucy heard was a snap. One snap and she woke up on the bed, sunlight flooding her room, piercing through her light curtain. She sat up and looked at the pink part of her hair strangely. Just what in the world was going on? Isolde stood before a floor-to-ceiling glass wall, gazing at the expanse of the Dragon City beyond the greenery around the mansion with folded arms. Not far from her was Isaac. About a dozen feet behind, he also gazed at the bright sun that illuminated the room. Then he turned his head to the screen. What he saw with his own eyes and what was on the screen were complete opposites. On the screen were different clips from several countries. The news anchors were currently discussing the state of the world. From the clips, he could see cities with red gates. It was happening in every part of the world, every country, not one was exempt. The skies were dark and the earth was bathed in the crimson glow of these gates. Indeed, this was the ruination, right before their eyes. People were being told to head for bunkers prepared by the authorities, for what was coming was an event many foresee to be even worse than the first apocalypse. But it was worse, way worse, especially because where he stood might be one of the worst places to be because Staten Island, a place that had never recorded a red gate and had a low rate of dungeon breaks and outbreaks, was about to be swallowed by the most fearsome green gate dungeon ever seen. People were already running to the island for refuge, but they were mistaken. It was better to take their chances with the monsters out there than with what was about to descend on this island. Isaac turned to Isolde. "Shouldn't we warn people? I've blocked off all the ferries and sent people to make announcements that Staten Island isn't safe. I also let them know it was the last place they would want to be. In return for that, they've been cussing and accusing me of being inhumane." Isolde tilted her head slightly so Isaac could see a bit of her face. They want the dragon's protection yet refuse to accept it when that dragon tells them to stay away because its cave is more dangerous. I guess fear does indeed make people become irrational. She exhaled. "Apparently, the public outside of Staten thinks I am the greatest mistake my father ever made." She almost chuckled. Isaac's hands went to his head. He packed his hair and released it while exhaling heavily. "Even if we bring people into Pendragon Island, there might be no way for them to leave. Leaving would mean death." Isaac lowered his head. "I can't believe Kane was right about this. It wasn't even more than 2 hours after I came with Godfrey yesterday that the ruination began." Isolde squinted. "Firstly, we can't bring hundreds of thousands of people onto this island. The economy will collapse in a matter of weeks. That aside, this island might cease to exist after a while. We've never heard of a dungeon surviving inside another dungeon. Secondly, Kane is only right this time because of his interest in Earth. He doesn't want it to be destroyed. Aside from that, he's a pretentious man and the most filthy liar, the worst kind in existence." Isaac felt intimidated when he saw Isolde's eyes. Her hate for Kane ran deep. He also disliked Kane, but before Isolde's intense emotion, his own was like a sprinkle in a cup. "Had the place not been this dangerous, I would have opted for Lucy to be here," Isolde said, and Isaac nodded. "Paradise is safer. It won't be affected by the ruination. I also felt unsettled when I heard she was with Kane, but he called several others to help fill books into shelves. She wasn't exactly targeted, and Percival is also watching over her right now." Isolde turned. "True, but we're dealing with a century-old being who has the world under control for 100 years. Being close to him is a huge risk. We shouldn't have informed her about me, and especially not about Kane." Isaac's eyes went wide. If she has no idea, she might become a victim. She's your friend, Isolde, your close friend. How can you say that? You would let her bear the pain that her friend is gone when she isn't. Isolde stared at Isaac with an unmoved face. I would. Isaac frowned. How can you be so cold? We shouldn't have let you know either. Isolde's statement silenced Isaac for a good minute. What? His expression became ugly. On the other hand, Isolde's face remained calm, almost unbothered. Isaac was used to this look. He was once a secret admirer of this same look, but right now, with what she was saying, even with how much better Isolde looked now, it disgusted him. It was like she was superior. He lowered his head, his mouth slightly open as if he wanted to say something while he nodded. Isaac was both stuck in disbelief and anger. I've not just seen or heard what Cain can do, I've felt it. I've felt his hand right through my chest. I've seen how miserable one can be before him. Fate, visions, they all put you right in his palms. At first I didn't know why, but now I do. It's because he's a favored one. He can't be outsmarted, not by a bunch of 19-year-olds. She turned completely, facing Isaac. He's built a network vast enough to span the entire globe. From the apex to the lowest, he's there, listening to your whispers. This little secret cost me my life. You don't want to know what it feels like to die, Isaac. You don't know what it feels like that even after death you have to fight, to resort to any means necessary to preserve your soul. She tilted her head. Do you know what it cost Godfrey? He just realized he was being bred like an animal in a farm. It cost us everything, and trust me, Godfrey wanted none of you to know about this, but you were sent to him. He took responsibility to accommodate a friend in his lowest point, and he trusted you because you were in the same state as him. I was and am also glad to meet with my friends, but that was our weakness. A weakness we have and Cain does not. Lucy had to know because most of us already knew. It was a chain effect, and we were happy the family was back together. That was a weakness. It stopped Godfrey from becoming exactly like Cain wanted, but the cost for that is your safety. I don't care, Isaac responded. I don't want you or Godfrey to babysit me. You are both my friends, not my parents. You have no qualms about Percival knowing. You are not too disturbed about Snow either, but me and Lucy. You see us as weak, that we need to be protected, to be tucked away nicely so we won't break. That's all this is. It is all this is. It's the unfortunate truth, but that doesn't mean I don't see you as my friend. Isolde's reply made Isaac laugh sarcastically. Lucy won't feel the same about you if she hears this. You know Lucy has always been sensitive to her limitations. I thought you felt for her, but this, oh, I see. His eyes darkened. She's not a special girl like you. One of the few, if not the only girl in the entire world to be a chosen one. That's your advantage. Without it, you'd know what it feels like to be in Lucy's shoes. Isolde chuckled softly. It's how the world works. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. My social standing as the Pendragon heir back then and my position as a chosen one have given me a great advantage. It's made me break my limit easily, but once that's gone, it's gone. All my hard work would be capped at a limit. She looked at him. I know that limits don't apply to us because we're different. We keep growing, keep breaking limits like they're nothing, but those limits weren't meant for us in the first place. They were meant to keep billions and trillions, if I include other worlds, at their respective places while we open the doors. Limits are the next door we see after the last, but they aren't meant for people like me because we're meant to open that next door, but not all that followed would join us in the next. Isaac, that doesn't mean we're better. We just have different problems. I have to bear the risk of knowing that if I'm not careful, one of my dragons will devour me. Does Lucy have to worry about that? My life is always at the edge, and I will live like that forever, knowing that one mistake and it's over. So how can you? Isolde held herself. She shut her eyes and rubbed her forehead. Forget all of this. The point here is Lucy is in danger and she's too weak to defend herself. And even if we're to gang up, we might still lose to Cain. This means I put my friend in what I can't get her out of. Some decisions are painful but necessary, but I and Frey failed. You didn't. You just opened up to your friends, and there's nothing wrong about that. I don't care if I die for what I know is right, and I don't think Lucy does either, Isaac said and turned away. He cleared his throat. Their conversation might have gotten too heated. Godfrey told them Percival would be with Lucy. His father would be with his mother, while both of them should fight together against the gate that would soon open up, and he was here arguing. Just as Isaac was about to apologize, Isolde's phone buzzed. She picked it up from a side stool and her eyes sharpened. "Is it here?" Isaac gasped. An elegant golden knight holding a spear suddenly stepped into a medieval city from thin air. Her eyes pierced through the almond-shaped eye-holes of her helmet, scrutinizing the street. Isaac appeared behind her. They went to the Pendragon Island Gate, the gate that led to the outside world, and when they went through it, this was where they appeared. A green gate had consumed a large portion of Staten Island, although Isolde had never been in this city before. She felt a trace of familiarity because of her vision. Before them rose an immense ancient city forged from gray stone, its towering walls and layered districts climbing over one another like a mountain carved by human hands. Countless structures rose into the sky, temples, keeps, bridges, and spires, all bearing the scars of age and abandonment. Torchlight burned along the empty streets, casting restless shadows across cracked roads and forgotten plazas. Despite the silence, the city did not feel dead. It felt waiting for its new inhabitants. Or maybe its next victims. At the northern end stood a gigantic statue of an elven maiden, so vast it overlooked nearly the entire city, her long stone robes flowing to the base of the monument. Golden strings extended from her fingertips, descending through the air in shimmering lines that swayed gently above the streets below. Around the statue burned seas of candles, their warm glow illuminating the ancient stone in pulses of gold. It was beautiful. The skis were dark, as though they sought to smother the moon itself, yet its pale silvery light pierced through the clouds and fell upon the elven maiden, bathing the ancient city in a soft, nocturnal glow. "I'll be back," Isolde said to Isaac, and sprouted draconian wings that spread out so wide they almost reached the end of the street. A swift gale blew outward as she took to the skis with one powerful flap. She went high enough to see the entire city and beyond. She saw people in the streets, people from Staten Island. Many were already on the streets, and some were emerging from these old buildings with disbelief morphing into unease, and for some, fear. It felt like they were sent here to become residents of this strange city. There were hundreds of thousands of people. This was the biggest green gate Isolde had ever seen. She had not heard of anything of this size either. The ruination was finally here. She was now face to face with her vision. Every single person here, probably over 300 to 400,000, would die according to the vision she and Godfrey saw. This was the dungeon of the creeping darkness. This was the city of sacrifice. After spending the night sharing all they knew about the creeping darkness and inquiring from the alchemists, they discovered nothing could affect this thing. No blade, no skill, not even dragon breath. Only light, meaning they needed a light-based skill strong enough to repel this darkness, and that was why Godfrey had to brave the dangers of Patan's unknown terrain and head to the ruins of the Golden Castle for the rune of the Golden Light. One of the natural runes that gave the order their identity and symbolized the light of the sun. Her life and that of nearly 500,000 people were banking on Godfrey retrieving that rune before the creeping darkness swallowed them all. This was a battle against time, where even demigods were still helpless. Isolde tightened her grip around the shaft of her spear as her wings beat the air gently to keep her afloat. But then, the cries and roars of dragons rang from beyond the city. The wind shook as the beating of wings that could make hers look like that of a child shook the hearts of all who heard it. Isolde laid eyes on dragons flying toward the city. The smallest amongst them was 150 feet long. These dragons were from the afterlife world. They all had black twisted forms with eerie blue light shining from the gaps between their scales. They were once glorious creatures that were now amongst the damned of the underworld. Their dark blue eyes locked on the thousands in the city, and their throats glowed. Fire ran up and blue flames burst from their maws, consuming the ground and heading for the wall like a tsunami, but of flames. The heat alone made people scream. Lord Tier and King Tier summons were no different from average victims in such a battle. They were 2 eras behind. All these once apex summoners could do was run with their families. Isolde brandished her spear and shot forward. She had grasped the advantage of her position as Mother of Dragons aside from its curse. When she grew, her dragons would grow stronger. A select few would become stronger than her, most times by 3 to 5 points, sometimes more, especially for Luther. And when they also grew beyond the push she gave them, she would also grow stronger, which would, in return, make her dragons even stronger. It was a never-ending cycle that favored both sides immensely. But she was capped at 40 with 5 dragons that were also at the peak. Unfortunately, when it came to unleashing her dragons, the mana system of summoning came into play, which meant she depended on Godfrey's mana pool. She could only summon a little more than a dozen of her strongest dragons, and that was pushing it. These massive creatures consumed a ridiculous amount of mana. Summoning one powerful dragon and a few weaker ones to round it up was the best tactic. However, against almost 24 dragons, all of which were progenitors and demigods, she had to go all out. Even if she didn't want to say it, when it came to dragons, Isolde found herself at the apex. She was the most formidable dragon summoner on Earth. "Luther, Grace, Nyx, Aeon, emerge," she said, and several portals opened up right as the damned dragons wrecked a huge portion of the wall with their flames. A portal popped up in Luther. Isolde's black dread brought out his head. His portal was above her. Luther growled and flew out. He was well over 1,000 feet long. His size alone paralyzed thousands in fear. The wind shifted and howled with each flap of this creature's wings. It blocked out the moonlight, encasing the city in darkness as his roar tore through his maw, exploding throughout this vast city. Even for dragonkind, Luther was a menace. He was too young to be this big. Dragons began to grow very slowly when they reached the 500-foot mark. It took a few hundred years to even get close to 800 feet. Right now, Luther was so massive he needed the largest mountain in his mother's domain for himself. Purple dragon fire burst from his maw, blasting through the damned dragon's fire and engulfing 2 of them. They screamed as they fell, smoke trailing their descent. Others divided, preparing to attack this beast from all sides. But Grace came out of her own portal. Once a wyvern, she had grown to become a fearsome frost dragon. Still hornless, Grace, who had grown to 400 feet in length, graced the skies. Frosty mist billowed off her body, raining ice pellets on the city below as she blasted a powerful mist at a damned dragon. It encased half of the dragon in ice, forcing it to fall. It roared and breathed fire to melt the ice, but a red dragon with white underbelly, the same length as Grace, dived downward with its maw open. Aeon chomped down, biting off a massive chunk of flesh from the damned dragon's neck, then spread out his massive red wings to negate his fall. As the damned dragon spiraled downward with blood and ice mist trailing behind it, Aeon unleashed his dragonfire to completely seal the deal. He already had several scars from battles fought to preserve his Horde mountain peak. Those battles made him more skilled. They also increased his strength, which made his mother stronger. And that in turn made him much stronger. With a cry of excitement, Aeon flapped his wings to join the battle in the sky. Nyx moved so fast the damned dragon she collided with only realized what happened when they crashed into the city, leveling multiple buildings. Her sharp mandibles tore through the dragon's scales with ease. It roared and blasted fire everywhere. Nyx vanished and manifested several violet orbs before launching them downward. The explosion shook the earth. Isolde spun her head when she saw Luther had chomped down, eating a dragon's body, leaving only its tail. Wings and head separated as they fell, but the price for that was other dragons blasting fire at Luther's blind spots. He roared. His size was a great advantage, but it also had its disadvantages. "Jeff, ghost!" Isolde muttered and opened another portal. Red and gray mist billowed out of the portal. Once known as Jeffrey when he was human, now baptized by the ways of dragonkind, Ghost brought out his head with a spine-chilling growl. His bright crimson eyes reflected the battle of several colored flames clashing in the air between massive winged creatures. His kind. With a loud boom, Ghost shot out of the portal. He was the only dragon with 4 draconic wings that gave him better aerial advantage. His mist exploded like a smoke bomb and he vanished. In the next moment, red lightning struck one of the damned dragons attacking Luther's tail. Another turned but saw nothing. Its eyes widened when it sensed a presence behind it, before it could turn. Ghost's claws tore through its back and red lightning struck, piercing through the wound and burning the dragon from the inside out. Isaac stared at the sky, stunned, and he wasn't the only one. Many were equally frozen by this sky battle. "Are you not going to join the fight?" Neela's voice rang in Isaac's head. Isaac ran, his boots slamming against the paved street as he watched a dragon descending from the sky. It was another one Ghost attacked. This dragon evaded the attack, but Luther's tail tore its wing open. Isaac shot a web to the last building that would lead to a right turn. He held the web tight and kept running as if he wanted to crash into the house on the other end of the street, but the web pulled him back. That sudden force took his feet off the floor and he shot more webs, each web pulling him higher and higher until he landed on top of a tall building. While doing all these, he was calculating the falling dragon. With great force he leaped off, soaring into the sky, right past the falling dragon, his hair fluttering wildly. When it saw him, the dragon launched dragonfire at him, unaware of the huge black spider with crimson eyes below. Neela prepared thousands of pale strands, stretched between buildings, woven into a dense labyrinth of sticky silk strong enough to ensnare her target, which was a dragon this time around. "Little twerp, don't get yourself killed." Neela's voice rang in Isaac's head as he forced himself out of the dragonfire's path by webbing the dragon's wings and spinning around the dragon. He scoffed at Neela's voice and landed on the dragon's chest. He activated an echo of Neela Spider Spawn skill, and small spiders manifested from nowhere and began to move. They couldn't inflict damage on this dragon because of his tier, but they could be a nuisance, a proper one that could keep this dragon distracted. Neela was a 38 titled god tier summon, and although he couldn't gauge the exact tier of this dragon, it had to be a titled god too, but with a much lower point. However, it had greater offensive power. "He's all yours." Isaac ran along the length of the dragon and leaped off as it fell right into Neela's web. Neela grabbed her web as she moved below it while the dragon was stuck on it. She quickly scuttled over as the dragon kept struggling. Her forelimbs pierced the dragon's skull, killing it in one calculated blow. Her eyes zoomed in on another dragon swooping down for her. Neela left the web and fled the scene as the dragon roasted its dead comrade and burned down her web. As the dragon flew over the ruins, searching for her, Neela, who had reverted to her human form, transformed back into a giant spider and launched a web at the dragon's tail. Then she pulled backwards, forcing the dragon to the ground. With a loud sound, it crashed. The dragon roared, but Neela launched several webs, locking its tail and limbs to the ground, then webbed its mouth before it could breathe fire. She transformed into her humanoid form. Her 8 spider legs reduced and clung to her body as she licked her lips. Neela opened her mouth and absorbed the dragon's memories before one of her spider legs pierced through its skull. There. You're a child fighting your mother with the intent to kill. Tusk, I knew not having offsprings was the right call. She muttered to herself, ignoring some obvious factors like this dragon's state. All she knew was that Isolde is their mother, regardless of whether she gave birth to them or not. She gave them a home, made sure they had food, and strengthened them. Her rise to becoming a demigod resulted in her rehatching all her dragons and anyone that came to her domain, turning her title into a reality. Where is that little? Neela paused when she found Isaac leading people toward the northern end, toward the statue of that elf. Since the dragons were coming from this other location, that was the safest place to be, but with what she just saw, that might not be the case. But for now it was safe, at least until the last dragon fell. Neela looked up at the bloody battle between dragons. A quarter of the city was already in ruins, but her 8 eyes were on Isolde, who was controlling her spear with her finger. The spear tore through a dragon's skull, turning it into an ice sculpture that burst into 1,000 ice shards. She remained in one spot, in the center of a battle between apex predators, her red hair fluttering as the moonlight kissed her golden armor with an ethereal glow. As much as she would hate to admit it, Neela found herself drawn to the aura this young woman had. She had never admired anyone, especially not one from her own gender, but Isolde was about to draw out that emotion, and she disliked that. Godfrey, Neela frowned. Whatever you're doing, do it fast. Neela looked at the elf statue, then back at Isolde. Or you'll lose her. We're here, Your Majesty. Solstice's voice rang. Godfrey sat on Solstice, who was now a golden-scaled dragon flying over a sea of trees. Both of them laid eyes on the ruins of a blessed land. Where the Golden Order castle once stood was now sunken. It was a ruin covered with light fog. A magnificent structure, the hope of the Patan world, had sunk several meters deep, with only a few structures barely visible through the fog. The streets, the spiraling towers, the walls that stood for centuries, all had crumbled. Land, Godfrey said, and Solstice flew down, landing on a cliff right before the vast sunken city. Godfrey leaped down and walked to the edge. He looked at the vastness of this ruin, imagining the glorious days of the Order. He left Paradise immediately after they left the watchtower and began planning with Isolde, then went to meet the alchemist whom he spoke to. He also spent time learning and studying the map of the Golden Order before starting the journey on Solstice's back, flying for hours non-stop. Godfrey's voice was low, his eyelids dipped down. He needed rest to be in his peak state. Who knew what he could face here? Not even the alchemist knew. But Isolde's life was at risk, the same for Isaac and many others. He knew his priorities. He also knew there were pitiful people out there, amongst the detestable public. It had been almost 48 hours of constant activity. Maybe he should have slept on Solstice's back. He could have, but instead spent that time thinking about who to use these 4 demigod cores on. They could push Solstice to the peak. They could be given to 4 alchemists, meaning he would need just 6 more to unseal Abaddon. Or he could try shattering Mountain's restriction with these cores. If it didn't work, all these cores could go to waste. As he stared at this place with a weary mind, Godfrey came to a conclusion as his head throbbed with a headache. It was time to make Mountain a general and unlock his true potential. Hopefully, 4 cores would unleash his stunted potential. Godfrey sat down and brought out 4 diamond-shaped cores. His eyelids lowered, forcing him to shake his head. This weary feeling, he didn't want it, but no matter how he shook his head, it remained. It felt like the moment he closed his eyes, he might sleep off. His eyelids just wanted to close. After rubbing his eyes, Godfrey looked at the trees below the fog. The landscape was uneven, with some parts sinking even lower, but the vastness of this place was breathtaking. Some walls sunk yet stood, Some had fallen and Godfrey's couldn't spot them as they were hidden below the fog. The farther he looked, the thicker the fog, but most of the structures over there were intact. That might be the main castle, the heart of this order. Godfrey shut his eyes and his soul appeared in his soul space, right in his throne room. He sat on the tall throne and leaned back. Mountain, his voice echoed and a diagram flared up. Mountain stepped out, then fell on one knee with his shield before him. He threw one core to Mountain. It flowed into the night, but he didn't budge. There was no change. Godfrey gave him the second one and it made a subtle glow, but that glow died out fast. Exhaling heavily, Godfrey gave him the third core. The first two were from Nathan and Alora, this one was from Arnold. As it flowed into Mountain's body, his aura swelled. It kept rising and rising, pushing against a barrier like a balloon with too much air. At the last moment there was an explosion. Mountain's tier began to ascend. It rose to the throne tier, went to saint, then divine. Godfrey swiftly handed over the last core. This one was Saul's. It was the core of a peak-level demigod, and he was afraid that barrier might return if he didn't act fast. Mountain's aura detonated. His armor began to adjust as his body grew. Pathans were no different from Earth humans in terms of size. The major difference was their lifespan. It was the false heart that made them grow into mini giants clad with heavy steel. After a short while, the light died down. A knight stood like a golden monument, broad-shouldered, heavy pauldrons and still. Heavy furs draped across his shoulders and down his back. They softened neither his appearance nor his bearing. Instead, they made him seem larger, like some ancient beast wrapped in the hide of another. His armor was forged of deep gold, not bright like polished treasure. Across the center of his chest plate, small and almost humble compared to the rest of the armor, were etched the words, "Defender of the Young." The inscription was worn by time, yet preserved with care. A white cloak hung behind him, shifting slowly, while leather bindings and iron clasps secured chainmail and steel plates together across his frame. Small golden crystals hung from cords resting on the beast fur and shoulders, glowing faintly like trapped sunlight. His helm was the most striking part of him. It concealed his face entirely beneath golden steel, leaving only a narrow shadow where his eyes rested. Rising from the sides of the helm were two long horns that curved upward and slightly forward, uneven like the horns of a mountain beast. They were not decorative in appearance. They looked weathered and real, as though taken from some creature slain long ago and bound to the helm as a mark of conquest. Resting over his shoulder was a massive hammer axe mounted upon a long golden pole. The weapon bore the weight and shape of an executioner's tool. One side held a broad axe blade, curved and sharp enough to split armor, and a heavy hammerhead built to crush bone and steel alike. Even at rest, the polearm looked heavy enough that few men could lift it properly. Yet Mountain carried it with one hand. There was little arrogance in the way he stood, no dramatic flourish, only the calm stillness of a man who had spent years standing between monsters from dungeon gates and civilians meant to be protected. "You're back," Godfrey smiled. Even his weary mind gave way as he gazed at this gallant knight whose shield was now like a door with faint runes. He could hide behind Mountain's shield and no one would think he's there. Mountain, his first knight, was now a 15-foot-tall general. After reading Dax's monolith, he discovered Dax was his only primal type summon. He wasn't a hybrid because there was no beast within him, but because of the tome, he couldn't lose out to anyone. He was a mage indeed, but his symbiosis was as low as 7%. This gave Godfrey a sigh of relief. He was afraid it would drop to 5%. This was one of the major reasons he chose to ensure Mountain's restoration. Summon, Knight General of the Golden Order. Type Hybrid. Tier 36. Potential unknown. Description: Mountain, once a native of the Snow People, has now been restored to his state as a general. As a primal, this general can call forth his personal troop of 100 snow heavy infantry. The Snow Mountain unit is recorded as the strongest footman unit. Each Snow Mountain infantryman is one tier lower than their general and can use mimic on just one innate skill, capped at monarch tier. This knight general still has access to blackout state, which will allow him to use his chimeric abilities. Godfrey chuckled softly. Those 4 cores were not wasted after all, the risk was worth it. Mountain tilted his head downward, his grip on his weapons tighter than ever. Godfrey opened his eyes and returned to the real world. Golden portals flashed behind him, unleashing all 9 knights. With Mountain added to the mix, his own strength once this ruination was over would be above the monarch tier. Maybe he would be at the peak of the sovereign tier, a step away from God King tier. Once this is all over, I'm killing Cain. I don't see a better opportunity. Godfrey muttered. The immortal armor manifested over him. What do you think we're going to face there? It asked. Whatever it is, I'm ready. Godfrey jumped down, vanishing into the fog along with his knights. You're finally here. A man with long white hair and 3 horns, 2 from the front part of his head and the last from the back. The light creases at the side of his eyes and his thick short beard couldn't indicate his age. He looked like a man in his 50s, but he was actually over 200 years old. His hands had scales with long claws, making them more beast-like than human. He stood on a round platform. Behind him was a wall with armored figures carved into it. A broken staircase was before him, and a young man with 2 horns and short white hair reluctantly ascended this staircase to meet with him. One of the young man's horns was bigger than the other. Don't tell me you called me here to lecture me about these dead men again. The young man clenched his teeth, his frustration evident in his glare. The older man turned to the wall. Do you know what the 3rd horn blast signifies? 3rd blast. The younger man raised an eyebrow, then looked around. The fog was above them. A good portion of this castle still stood. It was like a labyrinth, one that took them years to clear and map out. This better be good, the young man replied and folded his arms. We have 3 horn blasts. You know the first 2. The first one means our hunters have returned, the second means there's a monster approaching. The third, on the other hand, means they're coming. The older man frowned as he looked at the armored figures. Dead men, the younger one slapped his forehead. Think about it. Why do we have a 3rd horn blast to warn us about these golden knights? I've been thinking about it, and I realized not all of them are dead. We're Pathans that took the blessing of the dragon to become monsters. We helped wreck the old civilization ruled by the Golden Order. They are the worst you would ever meet with these horns on your head. The older man turned. They slaughtered our lords, the dragons, killed the sun and encased the world in darkness for days, wiped out the army of 500,000 undead with just 3,000 heavy cavalry. All they did was kill the commander, not the entire army. The younger man scowled. Clearly, you don't know history. 3,000 men rode into an army of nearly 500,000 undead, right to the heart of it, and killed the Dark Lick who was protected to ward off archers. Just 3,000 men. They've been extinct for centuries, but we still keep watch. The younger man approached the wall after listening to all that and slammed his fist into it. He opened a hole in the first armored figure's head and did the same for the other 2. Past glory, you're too afraid for your own good. These monster-slaying terrors died to monsters, their glorious order in ruins, left for us to harvest. We might have feared them once, but their fire burned out at the end. It was pathetic if you ask me. He turned and went down the broken staircase. Halfway through, the older man's voice echoed. We still exist, so can they. They'll kill us without a second thought. If you ever hear the 3rd blast, you run and pray you survive. The younger man slammed his boot against what remained of the stone railing and it crumbled. Can you hear yourself? You're deranged. You must have visited that witch again. Third horn blast, third horn blast. She's been saying that for 50 years. You're this old yet so foolish." He spat, then stormed off. The young man approached a wide hole not too far away and climbed a ladder down. At the bottom, he saw other mutated Pathans standing before a massive golden door. They finally found it, after digging for who knows how long. These Golden Order folks knew how to hide things. "We're here." Their leader, a young-looking woman, stood before the door. She wore golden armor. It was roughly made, had just one pauldron, a breastplate, and arm guards. The same for most of them, including him. The young woman had two sharp, flat horns from the sides of her head, almost like hardened wings that grew out of her skull. "After a decade, we finally found the entrance to the rune of golden light," she smiled. Everyone looked at themselves, with smiles on their faces. "It's all yours," the girl said to a huge man with sunken cheeks and thick dreadlocks. He had a crown of horns jutting out of his dreads. He lifted his hammer, moving toward the door with large strides. As the girl went back, she laid eyes on the young man. "Did he call you to talk about those dead men again?" she said, her voice echoing in the cavern. "What else?" The young man's reply made everyone burst into laughter. The woman shook her head. "I guess we'll always have a dreamer. Just don't end up like him. The men of gold are a myth now. We've long melted the scraps of their armor after pulling it off their corpses." The young man slowly nodded. "But why do we have a third horn blast?" "A what? There's no such thing." The huge man lifted up his hammer and was about to strike the door when a loud horn blast resounded. Everyone turned. "I guess the hunters are back. We'll definitely dine tonight once we have that rune," the young woman said with a chuckle, causing a loud cheer. But their cheer couldn't drown the second horn blast. It was really loud, which meant whatever was encroaching was a huge threat. "It sounds serious." The young woman frowned. There were a lot of people above, hundreds. There were about 700 here, a small colony. Their numbers were enough to deal with whatever the threat was. Still a feast, an even bigger one. The young man pumped his fist into the air. Every large-scale attack always ended up with excess meat. Right then, at that moment, as their faces lit up, there was a third horn blast. It was louder than anything they've ever heard. Like whoever was blowing it was saying just one word as loud as he could: "Run." Every sense of joy vanished from the young man's face. It couldn't be. Had that old man gone to blow the horn? A third blast was unheard of. He looked at others, especially the face of the girl who was their leader, and saw fear in her eyes. Fear? Why was she afraid? She said the third horn blast didn't exist. Seeing this, the young man bolted for the ladder, his heart pounding hard. But before he could grab it, the girl slammed her entire body into him, throwing him to the other side as she swiftly climbed the ladder. His eyes widened. He sprung to his feet, slamming his shoulder against his comrade and grabbing the ladder, but the huge man with dreadlocks held it, glaring at him. Clenching his teeth, the young man looked up, seeing the girl had already reached the top. He retreated, allowing the huge man to ascend, then followed right after. When he got to the top, his eyes narrowed at the sight of countless mutated ones flooding the expanse. This expanse was made up of some fallen towers and other structures that had become one with the earth, making it uneven, but there were short grasses and trees that were shedding their leaves. A few meters behind him was a broken yet standing castle, and ahead of this expanse was a wall, hidden in the fog. That was the inner wall, and a good portion of it still stood. That was where their watchmen were. Everyone had their eyes on the fog, and hands reaching for their weapons. The voice of the witch echoed in the young man's mind. "When the third blast shall echo, be prepared, for they are here. The Golden Knights, they shall show no mercy for the sins we have committed. We might adorn ourselves with the praise that we understood the future and became the mutated ones that rule, but at the sound of that blast." "Run!" The young man heard the older man's loud voice. He could literally feel the tremors of fear. His eyes went to the man who was still on that platform, close to the castle. He watched the old man run down the staircase when an arrow tore through the fog above, pierced with such power that his upper body split from the lower, and the arrow pierced deep into the wall. The younger man's eyes shook as he spotted the silhouette of a bird glide above the fog. It was fast, but he couldn't miss that figure. Something stood on that large bird, a humanoid being holding a massive bow. The knights. As he uttered those words, a rain of arrows descended from the fog. At the sight of it, he turned, pushing his body with all his might as he ran. Many raised shields, but they realized their mistake too late as those arrows, which were about their height, pierced through the shields with ease. Run, run, and pray you survive. Those words echoed in his mind, forcing him to turn. He saw tall beings clad in golden armor walking out of the fog. The young man heard they were tall, but they were not mortals. They couldn't be. The first, the one ahead of the others, had two swords, and his hands were stretched out as if beckoning for them to try. Try what they can. Over 100 mutated ones charged at them. Seeing this, Solstice moved. He was swift, killing his foes with just one blow, and then they would burn to ash. None dropped to the ground as bodies, but as scattering ash. Before the young man took 3 more steps, over 50 mutated ones were dead from just one knight who didn't even seem like he was trying. Dirge slammed her staff into the ground, and her long plume floated upward, as large stones suddenly pulled themselves out of the earth like a giant hand from above, yanked them off the earth. Her eyes gleamed with hate. These people they fought for, were the ones who sided with dragons, wielded the natural runes that brought ruin, and opened the dungeon gate on a sanctuary. A place for the homeless, the destitute, widows, orphans, and refugees that she took care of in the sanctuary, all slaughtered along with her sisters. That day she was wounded, a wound so deep that nothing could heal it, and thus the Maiden of Hope became the Banshee, the screaming terror that enslaved the souls of the dead. This path was what they forced her into. Her feet left the earth as she levitated. As the mutated ones ran, she clenched her fist and opened it. That move shattered those massive boulders into sharp rocks and launched them at such great speed that the air exploded countless times. Each small rock smashed their heads, blowing them right off. Some took off their legs, some opened holes through their chests. Tempest moved not like a human, but as a bolt of lightning, leaving behind a trail of scorched skeletons. He activated the pull rune of his double-bladed greatsword, and a huge man was drawn back. Lightning crackled off Tempest, spreading through the ground as he approached the man. "To where do you run?" That voice was the last thing the man heard as Tempest's cold, gauntleted hand grabbed his head. A rapier pierced through his skull, causing Tempest to tilt his head toward Toria, who tilted her head as if saying, "Did you think you'll be doing this alone?" "There's no way I'm dying here," the young man chanted as he spotted the girl and followed her. They were already far from the others, and she was with that huge man that had dreadlocks. For people that dissed the Golden Knights, they sure ran fast. The young man cussed inwardly as he slid down a slope, catching up to them even while he ran out of breath. He looked back and there was no one. This was it, he escaped. His head went to a cliff to his left. It was a good distance from where he was, but he could leave this castle from there. The girl and the huge man had the same thought as it looked scalable. But with slow steps, a knight on an equally armored horse with a massive halberd swung over his pauldron, and a shield appeared at the top. Each step that horse took made a sound that caused more goosebumps across the young man's body. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be SUPRISC for all of you. Stay tuned.
Hello.